Rashmi, I am so happy to have you. I have been looking so forward to having you on. Tell me about your history.
So when I was growing up, that it was never a question like, am I going to go to college? It's what college am I going to go to? And growing up in this, in an Indian culture, immigrant culture with high achieving parents, and I am absolutely a type A overachiever.
Really? I didn't really catch that.
And so I was so driven to achieve, looking back on those young years, right? Like teenage, 20s, all of my self-worth and self-value and self-love, and why I believed others loved me and believed in me was rooted in my achievements. So I didn't even know that I couldn't have even put words to that then, because I didn't understand that about myself. But certainly everything I did was driven towards making my parents proud of me, having people love me. I thought people loved me because of my achievements. And so that was my identity. My identity was, what school am I going to? What awards did I win? How much money am I going to make? All the societal definitions of success. I'm not the only person that's ever experienced this. I think this is a very common story. And so when I finally had the opportunity to essentially kind of start my own practice, after law school here, and I'll give a little history to your listeners. I graduated high school, went on to UNC Chapel Hill.
What was your degree there?
At UNC, I majored in communications, which was speech communication with an emphasis on rhetoric and then rhetorical analysis. And then I minored in business administration. I then went to Wall Street and I worked for a few years on Wall Street as an investment banker. And then I went to law school in New York at Columbia Law School. And also in all educational journeys of mine, I always kind of graduated top of my class. And I don't say that in any way to be arrogant or boastful. I think it's an important part of the story, given what happened later. So by all accounts, I was on this path to success, whatever that means. And I thought, great, I have made it. This is the goal and I've achieved the goal. And so everything will be hunky-dory. I'll share a little bit backtrack a little bit about my background. When I was in high school, when I was a little girl, my parents used to tell me about my grandfather. And my grandfather, on my dad's side, was a freedom fighter with Gandhi against the British. And so I would hear all these stories about his struggles and the fight and the revolution. And then, of course, India gains independence. By this point, he had gotten very ill because actually the day my dad was born, he was sitting in jail.
Oh, gosh.
This movement, with Gandhi. And so he had gotten so ill from being in these British jails for so long, so many times. So he, he was suffering. My dad didn't know from one day to the next if his dad was going to survive. The economy is in chaos because India's now gotten its independence, but there's so much unknown. They didn't know if the business was going to survive, their family business. And so dad grows up in this world of total uncertainty.
Right.
Eventually his father passes, and now my dad comes at 23 or 20 whatever, moves to America with my mom at 23, and again they've immigrated, they've left everything, total uncertainty with nothing, and they make it. So when I was sixth grade, we moved into the premier neighborhood in Miami.
And that was not a very long amount of time. They make it. They came over here educated, so I assume that helped. But still, you were really starting from scratch. Nothing.
So from 1970 to 1980, I think we moved into that house in 1983. So yeah, it was really pretty quick that they worked really, really hard and did well. And we moved into this incredible home on the ocean. And I would say I definitely led a privileged childhood, and I was very spoiled. I remember we used to host lots of parties, and then between 1986 and 89, there was a huge crash in the real estate market. My parents were involved in real estate. They had LLPs and private placements and syndications, and everything fell apart. They lost everything. So
your family lost everything.
My parents lost everything. So between 86 and 89, they lost a $40 million portfolio.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is
imagine the equivalent of today, what that is today, right?
What is that? How much?
I haven't done the research, but $40 million in 1986 was a crop load more now.
Yeah, you're never having to work. Your kids are never having to work.
It was all real estate, but they lost it all. They had to file bankruptcy. They lost the home to foreclosure. And I was a senior in high school. So I had watched my parents now essentially struggle. And, I watched them carry their personal favorite photographs and jewelry and into this small 1,000 square foot rental near my high school. And my dad would cry in the bathroom.
That's terrible.
And hide from us because he didn't want us to know. I only learned that he used to cry years later when I became an adult. So it was that watching my parents go through this fall and yet still have faith in each other, have faith in God, honor us as kids with the truth, and never ever lose faith in like themselves, that they always have this positive mindset and attitude.
Okay. So you
this
saw
is
that. Yeah, you saw that. And that kind of, in some respects, must have sat somewhere back in your mind as we get to your story.
100%. So I would say that as a kid, when I was a senior in high school, watching my parents go through this, there was something in me that triggered, like, I just have to work really, really, really hard, do all the right things, and be the best little girl I can be so that I can achieve this success so I don't have to struggle.
Yeah, you never want to go through that ever.
I don't ever want to go through what I watched my parents go through and what I heard about what my grandparents went through. So when I finally get to Columbia Law School and I graduate and I get this great job in California, and then I move to Miami and I get this great job, I'm working so hard to avoid the fact that I don't want to be in a struggle, right? And I was pounding the pavement. Eventually I start my own practice, and my husband at the time was a firefighter, so I'm the major breadwinner, and I'm pounding the pavement and going to every possible networking event and every, opportunity I could try to sell my services. I was a real estate attorney.
Right. That's what type of, explain to folks, not everybody is really familiar with real estate and what's involved in a process, but you're an attorney, for closing, I imagine, closing certain deals.
So I was representing buyers who were trying to buy property, so I would do their closing. I was representing sellers who were trying to sell their property, and I would do their closing documents. I was working with a lot of banks that were giving commercial loans that were either capitalized by real estate or by capital markets or by accounts receivables, and I would do all those documents for banks for those real estate loans.